We're going to have a very interesting panel now with leaders from the banking industry. We will be tackling the topic of how all these banks in the region are future-proofing their banks.
In this session, we'll do it a little bit differently. I mean, we've seen already a lot of slides, a lot of very exciting digital innovation. But in this panel, I would mainly like to discuss with my colleagues here, what does it really take to make digital transformation a success? All of these gentlemen, they have been on this journey. Many of them are in the middle of this journey. And these things are complex. It takes a lot of sweat and tears. And there are also many lessons learned along the way. So what I would like to do is share many of these lessons learned. So for everyone else in the audience, you can hopefully take them and embed them when you go back to your organization.
Okay, my name is Elyes Ben Rayana. I'm a board member at BIAT. Before I was an exec with BIAT. In parallel with my board role at BIAT, I have a second hat of founder and CEO of a technology company.
My name is David. I run the digital banking at Banque Saudi Fransi, and I'm in the middle of implementing Backbase.
So my name is Abdelrahman Ahmed. I'm the Chief Strategy Transformation Officer at Arab National Bank.
My name is Johan Ronquist. I'm the Regional Sales Director for Thought Machine, responsible for the MENA region.
Excellent. So let's get to it. And maybe to kick us off, I'll start a bit more broadly. Perhaps, Johan, first question to you, just to help us set the context a little bit. Because obviously you work with many of banking clients in the region and globally. What are some of the main trends that currently you see when it comes to digital innovation and digital transformation?
Sure. Before I do that, Martin, can I just give a quick brief overview of Thought Machine? Just so
Please do, absolutely.
Right. So Thought Machine, we are the next generation cloud-native core banking provider. We were founded in 2014. We are headquartered out of the UK, but we've got global presence. We've got a presence here in the Middle East, out of Dubai, servicing the region. And basically, we're working with all types of banks, different sizes, from tier one banks, such the likes of JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, UBS, to domestic regional banks, such as Al Raji and others. So moving on to some of the trends that we've seen. I've been with Thought Machine now for a year, and some of this will be a bit repetitive because we've had a few sessions earlier today. But one of the trends we're seeing is, and will continue to be the pressures from customer expectations. I think the customers are becoming educated, and they will continue to keep pressurizing the banks to innovate. They want things quickly, and they want them best of breed, quick, and so we'll see the continuous pressure from the customer expectations. I think secondly, if we look at some of the, we saw on the slides before, some of the, should I say, other industries which have been very successful with digital transformation. We saw names up there such as it was Google. We saw names such as Amazon, and we saw other names there. And I think that, in terms of the financial services, why can we not replicate some of what these guys are doing? So I think we can look at what these guys are doing, see if we can replicate it in the banking space. But I think one of the key issues there is going to be the things around having a modern infrastructure, having a banking platform that is modern. Excellent.
And maybe just to add to that, of course, these trends are here to stay. In general, in Saudi Arabia, the regulator is also, as of recently, very supportive of empowering digital innovation in the market. Many of you might know the digital banking license framework was introduced a couple of years ago. Since then, we already have had 3 new banking licenses awarded. There are 3 other players from the outside of Saudi who are at the moment planning to launch a digital attackers in Saudi. 1 bank from Egypt, 1 from UAE, and 1 Qatari-Turkish joint venture. So obviously, this trend is here to stay. I think maybe let's move in the panel to A and B, to Abdelrahman. Abdelrahman, it'd be good to hear from your side, how do you guys at A and B think about digital, and how does this fit in your overall bank's strategy?
Great. No, this is a really great question, and I think it's crucial for any bank when they're defining their digital ambition to make sure that it's fully aligned with their business strategy. I think it ties into what James was speaking about earlier. Essentially, what we've done at A&B is we have an overarching 5-year strategy for the bank, which defines the key priorities for the bank over the next 5 years across all business lines. So from retail banking, of course, wholesale banking, driven by, of course, the large corporates and medium, but also the SMEs. And then we have our private banking, where we cater to our ultra-high net worth individuals, capital, which is the investment banking arm, and then also the treasury, and then the other support services. So it's really end-to-end and covers all of our key areas. But then underpinning all of these is digital. And essentially, for us, the motto for digital is to be digital first. So, you know, whenever you look at not just the retail banking portfolio, but across the board across all of our client segments, we really try to make sure that we're identifying what are the key digital touch points that we can introduce? You know, how does digital overlap with the strategy, and how can digital support us to achieve this strategy? So really, it's part and parcel of the overall strategy. We don't look at them as 2 separate things, but they're really part of the same thing. And I think right now, what we're really trying to define is this whole integrated digital roadmap. So, you know, across all of our product lines and across all of our customer segments, what kind of features do we want to introduce, and what are exactly the key segments where, as a bank, we want to focus. So, for example, as you know, as A&B, we're a mid-sized bank, and essentially, it becomes maybe sometimes a bit difficult to compete on pricing with the likes of the larger banks, you know. So, okay, how can we differentiate ourselves, and what kind of segments are we really going to focus on, where we know we have a competitive advantage, and where we know we can, you know, gain scale, but at the same time maintain our profitability, which is, of course, an extremely important thing. So, yeah, so just to summarize, I think overall, they really are kind of very aligned to each other, and the digital strategy essentially emanates from the bank's overall business strategy.
Excellent, excellent. So look, let's maybe take it to the next level now. We've covered a little bit the global trends. How does this translate into digital strategy of banks? Maybe Elyes, if I might ask you next, what are some of the customer experience improvements that you guys have in the pipeline and you are launching in the market at BIAT?
Thank you. Well, it's not always an easy question when we want to innovate. I think once we launch the first product, which are the basic things and all transactions and typical things that we find, definitely we go also to origination and onboarding, that's for sure, and this is something that we're investing in. And then when you want to try and innovate and improve your customer experience, I think it's a logic where you need to sometimes to test things. So we are trying to do that in different directions. So the first direction is to try also to work in an open mode and to try to test things with other fintechs. And I see there different things we are doing. For example, we on the eKYC side, of course, to make it easier, and also working with the current regulation that we have in country. The other aspects also we're doing is improving and helping actually customers do more on our app, like for payment, for example, payment of bills and all that, and integrate with third parties. And we also find actually fintechs doing that for us, so we help and we integrate with them. It helps us get time. So I think there is also a second part of what we do is to try to leverage what we find, what others are thinking of, and we try to integrate that in our platform. This will give definitely a lot of improvements and give us ideas of what we need to do. And there is a third part, which is really a whole thing for us, is using data and AI, and how we integrate data and AI into digital. And we're doing that in different aspects. Of course, we've been anticipating with different use case in terms of advanced analytics, whether it is marketing or and sales or even risk. And what we now need to do is to bring this intelligence into our digital channels, integrating that with the different journeys that we have. So this is also a major focus actually for the next, for what's coming next for us. And another one, last one, I would mention also is chat. We are going to integrate a chatbot in our application actually this year. And also, I think that the conversational part also is very important. We started that internally like 2 years ago, a few months ago actually, maybe more than a year ago when we started launching our actually products. We provided our employees with a chatbot supporting on the application. It was internal first, helping our internal employees get more support on that. And then we're moving that, we've been testing that for months now, and we're moving that this year into the digital application now. But I think the conversational thing is something that's going to be big because it's a new way of interacting. I think it opens up a whole new era of interacting. Journeys are different. We can have the digital journeys, but I think the conversational capability and how we can go and grow all the possibilities of conversations is going to be a major theme in the future. And people are now getting used to the chat through the different chat applications, but also ChatGPT or elsewhere. I think chat will be also another interesting thing that we're trying to do and to improve the customer experience.
Fully agree. I think, many of these points will resonate with many of the audience in the room. I think especially the point on the fintech is a very interesting one, Elyes. I think especially in Saudi, more and more bankers realize, obviously, you don't need to develop everything in-house. You need to be able to integrate and work with the best in class for whatever functionality or service you're trying to launch to the market. Again, I think one thing that has changed in the market recently, the central bank and the regulator is fairly welcoming in allowing fintech and new market players fill in these specific niches in the market. There's a new framework and SAMA sandbox, which also allows new players come in Saudi, develop fintech proposition in a fairly controlled and protected environment, and later connect and help banks co-innovate. So I think this absolutely is a very good point, Elyes. Maybe let's go to, again, a next level of detail, and perhaps David, if I might ask you, BSF. What are some of the, you would say, main customer journeys that you guys are reimagining, and what are some digital customer experience improvements that you are launching in the market and the impact that you anticipate to create for your customers?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's safe to say every journey in the new app is something that we have revisited. Obviously, more importance gets shown for some rather than others. The obvious is going to be digital sales, right? So if there's a journey you want to get right, it's onboarding customers and selling them products, right? Because, well, for obvious reasons. I think when you look at the transactional side of things, so for existing customers who log into either their mobile banking or their internet banking, we've tried to make it simplified as much as possible, take out some of the banking jargon and have it something that seems more intuitive. So everything from the simple stuff, like how do you reset your password, or if you've locked yourself out, how do, because not only does that create a little bit of anxiety with customers, but it also is a cost to the bank, right? So we don't want people in the call center spending time doing this if we build a journey for the customer. So I think I kind of call that the basic hygiene level of journeys that are expected in today's market, right? And the precedent is set by the likes of the big tech companies who make it easy to reset passwords and click on magic links. But then I think if you look at the main reason why customers want to log into their mobile banking, first and foremost, it's for clarity on their financial position, right? They want to see their balance, and they probably want to either make a transfer of money or pay a bill. So, you know, it's very easy sometimes to get stuck on looking at journeys for innovation ideas and neglect the basics, right? So I think, you know, being able to add a beneficiary and make a payment, you know, TransferWise built an entire business on that one thing alone. So we've spent a lot of time on how to make that journey very easy for customers. But I think the one thing that stands out is kind of data enrichment now, because if you look at most banks, when you log into your current account, you'll see a list of transactions, and sometimes it's useful information. You might see a nice logo of the, you know, McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, but being able to drill down into that and actually see where was the location, what was the amount, can I have a map showing me these things? That's the type of thing that is understated value for most customers, right? Because they don't have generally that level of access to data. And then once you have that data, that makes you that much more able to do analytics and provide inside information to the customer about how their personality works, or give them a more personalized experience. So for us, that is our current priority. And once we get there, then we can, you know, start to look at the more innovation ideas and the journeys. But, you know, you have to set the foundation right in the beginning, and then that sets the precedent. And I guess the one thing I would add is, in going through this journey, what you're also doing is educating your own team about what does user focus groups look like, what does A/B testing look like, how to be agile. That's a cultural change that needs to exist before you can start to, you know, truly reimagine all of the journeys.
Very good, and fully agree. So in a nutshell, there's a lot of exciting stuff coming into the Saudi market. But now let's maybe move to the more complex part of this equation, and that is, how do you actually make it happen? I mean, I can give you a couple of examples when, you know, I work with many of my banking clients. Obviously, you know, they have a great vision, great ambition. They're quite clear on what the value proposition should be and how the digital experience should look like. But really getting this successfully to market, that's typically when it becomes quite complex. You deal with legacy architecture, you deal with very complex systems, and the journey going from the idea to actually going to impact in the market is quite a complex one. So maybe, Johan, I'll start with you. What would you say from your experience working with many of your banking clients, what are some of the must-haves that are really crucial to make digital transformation a success in an organization?
I think we've talked about this previously today, but one of the key ingredients will be creating this culture of innovation and really, you know, working with the right technology partners as well, but really cultivating this innovation and be receptive to change, because with innovation, change will come. So I think that's something you really need to be receptive to. And then we talked about getting the stakeholders, getting the executives behind, driving this culture of innovation and this culture of change. I think that's a key ingredient. Another thing I think is, you know, stop building, you know, choose and select the right technology partners that are going to deliver on your innovation strategy. And I think finding the right people. So I think having the right technology and having, you know, good people, I think you can make, you know, great things happen. So I think those really are key takeaways. Another thing we're seeing as well is that, and I think banks and execs are opening up to this as well, is that, you know, having, for example, a lean core banking solution such as Vault, basically what we'll do is we do what we're best at, which is really the core banking piece. And then what we'll do is we'll connect via APIs to the wider ecosystem, whether it's channels, whether it's reconciliation, whether it's reporting, et cetera, et cetera. So really getting the bank to build their own ecosystem of capabilities, really.
Very good. Maybe, David, I will ask you to a little bit build up on this using the BSF journey. I know that journey very well. I know there have been many learnings along the way. So what are some of the main lessons learned that you would share with the audience from your journey?
Sure. So usually those lessons are painful, right? Very rarely do you get a lesson that's enjoyable. But I think, and some of it was alluded to in the previous presentation, which is really around people, okay? So if you're going to be ambitious and try to do a digital transformation project, then one, you need to assemble the right team to the actual project, right? And every time you think you've got everybody that you think you needed, you realize that you've missed somebody else out, right? That does a couple of things. One, it fills the team with the right skill set to deliver the end product, but it also ends up with advocates around the organization who are going to speak positively about what you're doing. So I think, you know, the first thing I've learned is always plan on changing the team and getting the right skills, because there's always unexpected things that happen there. The other is, I guess, managing expectation up, right? So that means, I think the term was under promise and over deliver. To some extent, that's not always easy, because you don't get to choose. Someone's already said, you know, build me the best bank in the world, and you have got a week. So there's a little element of managing expectation, what you can achieve, what you can't achieve as well. And I think the biggest trap you can fall into when you do a project, which is largely technology based, is to just look at the technology side, right? So I could build the best digital channel system in the world, but if I haven't revisited all of the processes behind it, and I haven't got the buy-in of the people who are going to be, you know, whose jobs, day-to-day lives are going to change, then you've just increased the probability that your project's going to fail, because, you know, it only works if everybody comes together as a team. And so, you know, one of my, you know, personal ambitions in the project is also to be that cohesive person who can be the conduit between the team and the business. You listen to what problems people have, or why they think what you're doing is wrong. You either try to convince them, or you revisit it, and maybe you're wrong and they know best, right? So it's having that sort of empathy that to deal with people. And then I would say probably the biggest lesson to learn, and probably the hardest to execute, is how to say no, right? You never want to be the bad guy who says, no, we're not going to give that to you. And obviously, over time, you get better at saying it. But often, if you want that laser focus, you need to be able to just cut down on what is the priority and drives the biggest value for the organization. And the other stuff will come, but it will come later, right? And so how to say no to even the most senior people in the organization is something you have to learn and practice.
I could not agree more, and judging by the little smiles in the audience, I think it resonates with many, many people. Maybe, Elyes, let's also hear about BIAT, because I know you guys have been on the transformation journey for 3+ years. It's really quite impressive impact and what you managed to deliver in that span of time. If we were to redo it, or if you were to give a piece of advice to a colleague, what would you tell them? What does it take to succeed?
Maybe I want to come back to the framework that was presented about the why, the what, and the how. I think we spent in the beginning of the journey to, of course, the why. I think it's evident now for banks. I mean, why we do digital transformation, that's easy. There is a lot of focus definitely on what. And strategy, defining strategy, I fully agree. It's about what we are going to do and what we are not going to do, definitely. But also, I think we spend definitely a lot of time on what, what is the solution, what is the architecture, et cetera, but maybe in the beginning of the journey, we don't spend enough time on how are we going to do it, and really think about it, and being honest about the how, and take really the bold choices that you need to make it happen. So I'll take the example of what we did. So one of the, when we had of course, the roadmap, and we've been helped with that, knowing what we're going to do, and then we said, okay, now it's a question about, we need to build an innovation team, we need to build a digital factory, we need to build an execution team. So how are we going to do it? Are we going to do it within the IT department, which is already saturated with projects? I mean, we know we've been like over so many, the portfolio of projects is there, they're not delivering enough with enough speed, so it's gonna be tough. Then are we going to do it within the bank? Are we attractive from a talent point of view? And how are we going to tailor a talent and employee proposition, value propositions so that we can bring talent into the bank? So we were really honest about what we were able to do and not able to do. And we took bold choices. The bank took a bold choice saying, okay, we're not going to do it within the IT department. We're going to build a digital factory even outside of the bank, because it was a bit complex from HR perspective to build it within the bank. So we relied on a partner who delivered the full digital factory as a service in a way. So this is one of the choices, and we thought about the how, and we said this is maybe the way that it could happen that way. And then about the how, there are also other questions about product owners. Where are they? Who are the reports to these of these product owners? And we took a bold decision that's going to be in the business, and the business will be the one leading that. And then we had the interface with the IT department, 2 interfaces, definitely APIs, and then the second, the run, because at some point in time you need to hand over to IT what you develop. So, and these things, we said we're going to have tough governance to make sure that these integration points and these touch points with IT is working. So I think my advice is really to spend some time in the beginning to think about how, and be really honest about what we are able to do and not are able to do, and to take some choices and try in that direction. The second advice is about change, and also not only deliver the products, but prepare for change and involve business ahead of time, early in the project. What we did, for example, a very practical thing is that when we launched the digital products, we decided to have ambassadors in every branch, a digital ambassador in every branch, explaining and doing the explanation that is required. And in every entity of the bank, we had also a digital ambassador. So these are also the second part is about change, and we need to spend and invest enough also in change management.
Excellent. All of these are very, very good insights, and hopefully quite useful for many of you in the audience. Now to also conclude, let's talk about the most important thing, and that's the results. At the end of the day, all of us have a board and shareholders to serve. So maybe, Abdelrahman, I'll go back to you and to A and B. How do you guys make sure that the digital transformation and investments that you are making in the bank are actually generating the returns for you and for the shareholder?
Great. No, really great question as well. And I see we're running out of time, so I'll try to also keep it brief. But essentially, I think there are 2 key elements, and kind of, I have a very wordy job title at the moment. It's like strategy transformation. Essentially, so number 1 is, of course, when your digital ambition is completely aligned to your strategy, that helps a lot. And essentially what we've done is 2 parts. 1, defining your KPIs and what exactly are you aiming for, and from a strategic perspective also being agile. So for example, as we all know, right now we're in a very high interest rate environment, and therefore, we see a shift towards the balance sheet and banks, and specifically, you see kind of deposits going from, the current accounts into more savings accounts, which becomes more expensive. You also see less of demand on your lending products because people are not willing to take loans at very high interest rates. So essentially, making sure that those KPIs, then those business KPIs, are reflected from a digital perspective. And you look at things like, for example, okay, how do the bank needs to improve its liability base and its deposit base. Okay, what do we do? This means that from a digital perspective, for our clients, we need to improve our transaction banking services, which means, what does that exactly mean? Well, You need to look at the different customer journeys from a digital perspective and make sure that you're actually kind of like tying in the customers, making sure that they're staying engaged, that it's seamless enough, they're not dropping in the middle, and that their day-to-day banking and cash management activities are happening through you as a bank, because then this way, they'll need to keep some cash in their current accounts that they'll use on a day-to-day basis, and therefore improving your, essentially the ratio of interest-bearing versus non-interest-bearing deposits. So that's kind of like a very technical example of how to ensure that your KPIs from a digital perspective and at the kind of front-facing level are aligned to your overall business objectives. But then the other thing as well is kind of the transformation and change management approach that you take, making sure that, of course, you have clear ownership during the journey for developing your digital ambition and digital products as well. So essentially, one, I think what we do is we try to marry the agile way of working with also kind of the waterfall, because in the end, we are a legacy bank, we are an old organization, and people and most of our organization still works in kind of a more traditional way. So having the understanding of how digital teams work and how kind of the agile methodology works versus, of course, the more traditional bank is extremely important. And then this helps you to make sure that as you're delivering, you're kind of aligning these milestones to more traditional ways of following up on status updates and making sure you're reporting it at the right kind of intervals. And you're also running meetings and running kind of transformation touch points where they're very action-oriented and you know exactly what you need from the management team. So you're not going with kind of an open discussion where people don't really know. You're just raising a red flag, but then there's no action point. What I generally tend to do is actually those meetings are kind of like more of a rubber stamp, because you kind of pre-align, you make sure you go into the meeting knowing exactly what decisions need to be taken, and it becomes a very effective kind of, let's say, step in to make sure that things are going in the right direction. So that at a high level is kind of how we run it at our bank. And I think so far we've been seeing really good results. I think the bank, surprisingly, is known for being like the key bank that actually supports fintech in the country. We're kind of the #1 bank from banking as a service perspective, where most fintech in the country rely on A and B. And this couldn't have been kind of achieved without having a robust change management framework, but also robust KPIs where the business is really aligned to digital.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for sharing all of the insights.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.